Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady here at Forbes. I'm with Steve Price, our senior contributor. I'm going to call you football writer since we're talking World Cup and it's the real football. So, Steve, we're going into, at this point, Sunday with a matchup between France and Argentina. Tell us more about these two teams. How do they stack up financially?
Right, so yeah, these are two of the biggest teams in the tournament. When we look at all of the values of the teams, most people have said England were the most valuable team. Both Lloyd's, the insurers, said that, and CEIS Football Observatory, who kind of value team players, also had them as the top one, followed by then France and then Brazil. So France have they have the most valuable team in the final. Argentina were ranked eighth on this list, so their team's slightly less valuable, but they're still among those kind of top sides when it comes to team value. That team value kind of is made up mainly by the players' age, contract length, the club they play for, and the league they play in. So, because of those factors, it's maybe not the best way to judge 100% which team's going to win the final. And when you look at the players involved, of course, France's Kylian Mbappe is the most valuable player in the world. He's been valued at around $220 million. But when you look at Argentina's most valuable player, Lautaro Martinez, has hardly played actually in this World Cup. He's only played about 200 minutes. So even basing things on the most valuable player maybe is not the best move. Lionel Messi, of course, is Argentina's star player, but because he's already at the end of his career, his value is seen as very low.
I want to distinguish between value and pay. So the most valuable player is not necessarily the highest paid player, correct? Like in terms of their professional careers elsewhere, because I mean, they're coming from professional teams. These guys is often, the European leagues. Is that how do they? Value is a much more subjective calculation from what it sounds like.
Sure. So value would be how much the player could be sold to another team for if they were bought on the market. And of course, pay is totally different. Lionel Messi's value is very low. His pay is extremely high at Paris Saint-Germain. And so because of that, you have a bit of a disparity there. And when it comes to pay, these players are paid so much by their clubs that almost the money they get from the World Cup doesn't mean too much to them.
Who is the highest paid player, or who are some of the highest paid players in this World Cup?
Right, so still Lionel Messi's paid a huge amount by Paris Saint-Germain, and actually all of their star players, like Neymar as well, have very high paychecks than Kylian Mbappe. So they've been the players raking in the money recently, but at this time, everybody's kind of changing. So Cristiano Ronaldo, at the end of this World Cup, is going to be the lowest paid player in the World Cup because he's leaving his team and leaving his contract. And then maybe a week or two later will become the highest paid player in the world because he'll be joining a new club, possibly in Saudi Arabia, and possibly signing a huge contract because of that.
And let me step back a second and ask about the insurance because I'm curious about that. Is every team insured, and are they insured the same way you'd insure Betty Grable's legs? I mean, how do they actually insure these teams?
Exactly. If you're going to buy a player for $200 million or something, you're going to want to have them insured. So they're they're insured in their contracts, and all the teams have insurance in case a player gets injured, so that they don't lose any money. If a player gets injured at the World Cup, FIFA actually has to pay out money to their club team, and so any player who's got injured, their club teams will be receiving millions of dollars sometimes in compensation for those injuries.
And there's the money that I'm sure all this is set by FIFA, but can you talk a little bit about the prize? Is it going to be dispensed or dispersed, excuse me, in the same way if each team wins, or do they get to decide who gets what?
Right. So yeah, if the total prize fund is about $440 million, and the winners obviously get more. They get about $42 million, which is about 1.6 million per player out of the 26-man squad. But of course, players also receive appearance fees from their national football associations, and they've got lots of lucrative sponsorship deals. If you win the World Cup or do very well, you're more likely to get those deals in the upcoming years. Because players get so much though from their club teams, they don't really worry too much about this money. So a lot of players actually give this to charity. We saw Kylian Mbappe gave his money from the last World Cup to charity. We had England and Croatia, their national teams also did that in the last World Cup. And in the US, because of this disparity between the women's and men's game in terms of FIFA's prizes, the US has decided that they will split the money that they receive. So a lot of that money will go towards the women's team. And then when the women's team play in their World Cup in 2023, if they get prize money, that will be split with the men's team.
So I know there is quite a disparity there. And one of the, when you look at Qatar, I'm going to pronounce it the way I think a lot of people have this time, how they spent an incredible amount of money coming into this World Cup, like I think 14 or 15 times what Russia had spent. How do you calculate the return on investment? Any thoughts around that?
Right, so as you know, any major sporting event in the world generally seems to make a loss. These kind of huge tournaments, the Olympics, the World Cups.
Right.
There's so much infrastructure for such a short time. Of course, Qatar spending more than 10 times what Russia or any other World Cup has spent. So there's no way they're going to recoup that money in commercial terms. Instead, it's better to see that as an investment in their political capital.
Yeah. When you look at the impact that this has on Qatar, and just any thoughts as to whether net having covered other World Cups, of course, we're doing this conversation prior to the final. Has it been a success? Is it more weakly attended because of where it is, or how would you gauge this in the pantheon of World Cup experiences?
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to be more weakly attended than the next World Cup, partly because Qatar's stadiums are a lot smaller than the ones that are going to be used in North America. And so because of that, not as many people could attend as they wanted to. In terms of the infrastructure, even though it's got the smallest stadiums allowed by FIFA to host this tournament, it's still been stretched to the limit. We've seen them having to use cruise ships and create fan zones where people sleep in tents in order to accommodate all the people who have attended the World Cup. I think it depends how you look at it, but I think they would probably see, apart from it's not been perfect for them, they probably would see it as a success, especially within the region itself, within the neighbouring countries, where a lot of them have seen it as this is the first World Cup in the Middle East kind of area. And I think there's maybe a lot of pride about that. And that's kind of going to raise our standing a little bit. It's also helped them, politically get a lot of deals and stuff done behind the scenes, which is going to help them. And that's what that investment's really for, to build up political capital, that soft power.
I want to ask about just the impact of a win. We have France, the previous winner. As you say, a lot of these folks have come in as behemoths to begin with. It's a big sport in Europe. Is there any way to calculate the actual impact? Is it psychological to win, or is there an actual advantage to having won a World Cup? Either a financial advantage to France, or just in general, it seems to me it's much more of a celebration of the sport than it is something that you do for the money-making capacity it brings to your country. Maybe Morocco's different.
Yeah, so for the country itself, as you go through the tournaments and do better, of course, that's going to help the country. Of course, in England, every time they get to the next round, the beer sales in the pubs go through the roof, for example. And so you've got that, and yeah, it does give the more prestige to the country. I think with Morocco, it's put them on the map almost. More people are going to think of Morocco as a footballing nation. Morocco have actually wanted to host the World Cup and have failed to host it several times. Of course, they competed against North America to go for the 2026 World Cup. by doing so well in this tournament, that's going to help them and raise their prestige within football itself, which could help them maybe host other major tournaments in the future. So you've got that side of things. Even though maybe financially it's not as rewarding, it has those other benefits, especially for your name value, your prestige, and how people view you within the sport.
Great. Anything else we should be watching before Sunday's game, or that's on your radar you'd want to put on ours, Steve?
Yes, I mean, the thing everybody's talking about is this is, Lionel Messi going into the final. A lot of people have been comparing him to Cristiano Ronaldo, and especially looking, with a bit of recency bias towards this tournament.
Right.
Probably should remember that Ronaldo's more than 2 years older than Messi, and when you're coming to the end of your career, those extra years are very important in terms of what you're able to achieve. But if, of course, Lionel Messi and Argentina do win, then that would put him level with, say, Diego Maradona, who, of course, won the World Cup with Argentina. And they both also have scored 5 goals this tournament. So if he could score one more, that would top what Maradona did in the 70s.
And so Pele, who I know is in hospice right now, not necessarily viewed as the greatest of all time. The battle is between those two at the moment for deciding who really is in the top ranks.
Well, it's so subjective to decide who's the best of all time, especially when you're comparing between eras. I mean, when I've watched past footage of how Maradona played, he got fouled so much on the pitch, and if he was playing nowadays, that wouldn't be the case at all. The referee would stop it a lot more. That's going to maybe mean that if he was playing now, he'd be able to perform even better than he did in the past. So comparing between eras is very difficult. But when we're looking at two top players of the last 10 years or so, we've got Ronaldo and Messi. A win for Argentina would probably make most people say that Messi is the better of those two.
Great. Well, something to watch. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me.